the importance of the core developers is a given. But what we're going to determine in the next couple of years is, can we build an institution, a long-lasting, durable institution that supports those core developers and brings more of them in, keeps them operating at a sustainable pace, right? And kind of nurtures and lets them be creative the way that we trust them to. My name is Justin Florentine. You may see me online with the handle Robocop's Gone Mad. I am a core developer on the Besu team. And so we are an Ethereum execution client. That means that as opposed to providing consensus, we provide block execution, storage, all that fun stuff. Uh, yeah.
And Justin, what would you say has been your biggest contribution to Ethereum so far in your career?
I have one of these.
Okay, what is that? Explain.
That's from working on the merge. That is a commemorative coin that the all core devs folks got together. It is probably my most prized possession at the moment. Working on the merge was a big deal, right? Like we turned off a huge amount of power consumption for the crypto industry, all of it, right? We changed what it means to use crypto, kind of. I think the stigma around people using crypto was almost exclusively one of power consumption, and now that's the minority case. When people talk about, oh, I use crypto, most of it's proof of stake these days. So yeah, as far as things that you're proud of, that would be one of them. I mean, I worked on London, I worked on Paris, I worked on Cancun, pretty pretty deeply, and I think I'll ball them for sure, the merge.
Yeah. You've worked on plenty of Ethereum upgrades, and I do want to get into your experience working on the merge, but maybe to take a step back and start from the beginning, can you explain what were you doing before you became a client developer?
Lots of things. I've worked for small startups. I've worked for consulting companies. I worked for large multinational companies. I've worked for content companies. I've worked for the insurance industry. So my career has been a lot of going back and forth, both in the types and scales of companies that I work with, as well as management to individual contributor, et cetera, et cetera. So before I started working on the Besu team, I was a director of platform engineering for Elsevier, the academic journal and education company. Before that, I was a associate director of platforms for ESPN. So this is back like 2010-ish, and cable was not on the internet yet, right?
Yeah.
And so ESPN was actually one of the first companies to try and figure out, like, how do we get our stuff on the internet? How do we use it there? And so that was a ton of fun. I mean, we worked on cutting edge for 2010 type stuff. And it exposes you to a lot of the weird business challenges that you get with these large multinationals that have different economic concerns. You have to figure out how a content company dovetails with telecommunications companies and how they evolve when their core business model is threatened, right? So like if your core business model is, a lot of people don't like ESPN because it's the most expensive part of their cable package and they don't have an option to opt out of it.
Hmm.
And so ESPN's trying to figure out, like, okay, well, what does that mean for us in the future when people are getting their video content over the internet, and maybe it's a more a la carte type world, and we can't leverage this part of our business model. Yeah, so a wide variety of things. I know that was kind of a meandering explanation, but it does kind of, I think, define me as far as like my career goes, because I go back and forth between management and individual contributorship quite a bit.
What was the problem, or what would you say was what drew you away from problem solving on those things and building startups and solving these other problems to wanting to work full time into crypto? I mean, you kind of had a taste of all these other variety of topics and things.
Yeah.
What brought you to Ethereum?
I mean, life kind of happens. It was more of a life thing, right? So I was living up in Connecticut, in Bristol, Connecticut, ESPN's headquarters, and me and my family just weren't that happy up there. We were originally had kind of started our family in the Philadelphia area. I had my son up in Connecticut, and we missed our friends, and so it was kind of just life being like, "Hey man, you're not that happy. Let's go find something else." So I just sat down and made a list of like things I want to do for my next opportunity, and then did none of them. So I got down to Philadelphia and I was like, I just need a job. And so I got a job at Elsevier and it was fine for a few years. But then after that, I was like, we're less than a year into COVID and it's lockdown. And I'm like, this is dumb. I'm out of here. And I was like, oh yeah, I made that list. And so I dusted off the list and I looked at it and I don't remember all the companies that were on there. And, Consensys wasn't on there, but I definitely had like something crypto just kind of penciled in there because I had been, traumatized by 2008, like a lot of people. I was kind of at that age where I was like still paying off college loans, and then 2008 happens, and I was like, I'm never getting ahead. I'm
And
never
you're
getting
talking
ahead.
about the financial crisis where
Yes,
Bitcoin was born.
yes, yes, yes. Um, and so that got me interested in it, right? And then, you have a kid and you're like, maybe I'll do a little Bitcoin mining on the side, sock it away. Maybe it'll be worth something someday. And so it was always kind of just floating around there. It was nearly 100% political. The technology was always super interesting, but I was actually an Ethereum skeptic for a long time. Like I was not really, I was kind of a, you know, Ethereum's a meme coin type Bitcoin maxi for quite some time. I think later in life, when I got more financially sophisticated, it clicked. And I was like, oh, digital gold is dumb. Why would you want a digital version of gold? It's so useless. It's like heavy and you can't really do much with it. Not the kind of thing that you want to embody digitally. Whereas general purpose computer and like distributed trust, I was like, that makes a lot more sense to me. And so I had been becoming more smart contract curious, I think, and then just kind of lucked into a position at Consensys and with the Besu team. So luck is a big factor.
I'm sure there's so many like positions you could have taken for Consensus, from like project management more to the business side. I mean, did you have a choice? Like, did you know you wanted to be more technical, like developer?
I did. When I talked about that pendulum that goes back and forth between management and individual contributorship, it was time for that to go the other way. And so I had been managing multiple teams in cloud microservices type situation, and I was like, I need to get back over to the other side of things. So I was very specifically targeting a senior Java developer type position. And at Consensus, that was the basic team was a natural fit for that.
And when you joined the team, so what year was this again?
This would have been 2021, early 2021.
2021,
Yeah.
your first full-time job, and it's with the Besu team building this Ethereum execution layer client. What were the skills that you knew and that you was being applied to this role, and what were the skills that you needed to learn on the fly?
So good news, bad news. There's a significant part of the job that you don't know, you can't know, and that never changes. That's a constant. It's drinking from a fire hose. It's drinking from a fire hose every day. It's getting comfortable with, yeah, I don't know what that is, but I can probably figure it out in a couple hours. You know, that was a real big part of it. I mean, what I brought to the table was 20 plus years of Java developer experience and some pretty intimate knowledge of the JVM and low level stuff. Now, what was cool is that about a year after I got to Consensys and was working on the Besu team, we really went all in on optimization, performance improvements, and stuff like that. We hired some brilliant people that specialize in that. And so I had enough Java experience that I could take what they were telling me and apply it, right? So like there was a good fit there. I think the other thing that I kind of brought to it was a little strange in the open source world, where I think more like an architect and I think more like I think more like a team manager. I think more like somebody who needs to encourage people not only to write successful code, but write code that's going to be easy to maintain and easy for other people to pick up, right? So the idea that this is a living, breathing code base that is either going to rot because you're not paying enough attention to it, or it's going to get confused because you're not improving upon it intentionally. So I can bring a little bit of that mindset and a little bit of that I don't want to say pressure, but valuing things like readability, decoupling, mutability, all those types of architectural things that will make sure that as Ethereum continues to add and add and add new features and things like that, we can do it quickly and safely, et cetera. That's just kind of a mindset that you don't get a lot in big open source projects. So yeah, I think your question is kind of like, how do you look at yourself if you want to try to get one of these positions, and see where the gap is, see what's unique about your perspective and where you can apply it and see if it's useful.
Yeah, I do want to get to some more targeted advice for people that are listening and on how to get involved in Ethereum protocol development. But first, I want to kind of touch on what you were saying in the earlier part of our conversation about working on upgrades and working on the merge and working on these very high profile changes to Ethereum. When you think about your role, can you elaborate on like how much is actual time going into you building the basic client versus just a bunch of other things that you're doing for Consensys as a developer? I mean, if you had to split the time, is it really like you are working on these upgrades day in, day out for the whole year?
Kinda, yeah. The thing is, that it's not necessarily the specific upgrade. So, for instance, I'm writing our Glamsterdam proposal right now. Like, what do we think should be the headliners for Glamsterdam, right? So, we're working on that, which is a lot more concrete than the next thing that I want to work on, which is encrypted mempools, right? And it's not as concrete as the Fusaka work that's going on right now. We're getting ready to go into DevNet. So, yes, it is enough work to kind of fill up your day, but at different resolution almost, right? So like you've got tactical day-to-day stuff where maybe you're doing PR work or going over a benchmark that's failing or optimization. And then you've got slightly higher stuff that is going to be more conversing with other developers, conversing with researchers, trying to figure out, are the specs there yet? Things like that. And then there's much high level, more high level stuff that's further down the road and is strategic when you're saying like, well, this project, encrypted mempools is going to depend on some type of delayed execution. So we're hoping that either delayed execution or ePBS gets into the hard fork prior, and that informs your designs. So there's a little bit of juggling. Even outside of that, there's also kind of like off protocol work that needs to be done, things that maybe don't contribute to consensus, but are still really important to the Ethereum ecosystem. So there's the L2 rollup calls where the rollup folks come in and they talk about what they need. I run an RPC standards call where we talk about why are the RPCs different across clients? Who cares? Does anybody care? Well, yeah, dApp developers care, wallet developers care, et cetera, et cetera. But none of that stuff is protocol specific, doesn't break consensus. But it's still a lot of work and it needs to be done. So there could be room for me to work on non-Ethereum stuff at Consensys, right? We got plenty of other teams. We got lots of work for MetaMask, Infura, Linea, and maybe Linea I think might be a thing that I work on like a little bit, but not much. Yeah,
So
yeah.
in the Ethereum protocol, as a client developer, it's cool though to hear the multifaceted parts of just how broad that role can be, from
Yeah.
thinking about what the EIPs in an upgrade should be to working on that actual upgrade to all these off protocol RPC standards, these other initiatives that you have going on. Um, Kind of switching a little bit our conversation, because you've shared more about your role, how you got into that role, your background as a developer, some of the skills that you have come to the role with. When you look at client developers like yourself in the Ethereum ecosystem, Like, what is the role that you think Ethereum client and the responsibility that Ethereum client developers have to Ethereum? And how would you say that role has changed over the years since you became a client developer?
All right. So remember how I said that I was in this for the politics? We're gonna get political. So, because that's kind of a big part of this, right? So I'm very much a no gods, no masters type, right? And so I would love for core developers to be silent and interchangeable, right? Um,
Please
there's
elaborate.
yeah, you need to have public faces. You need to have your Vitaliks. You need to have people that are out there and that present the vision and can people can rally behind, right? But I also think, heroes are very dangerous. And so, again, political. This is a political stance, okay? I'm sure that I'm crystal clear about this. And these are my own personal preferences, right? So the utility of the core developers to Ethereum is very curious because they are uniquely useful to Ethereum. I have worked with smart people in the past. We kind of went over my resume. Never have I worked with this many consistently smart people at this level, right? And it is a raw form of intellect. Okay, and I think that's not necessarily purely good, too, right? Like we're at the 10-year mark. We are building an institution, we are growing and we are maturing. And then there's other forms of wisdom that are necessary other than the raw, pure intellect that you get from these super genius, computer scientists. And God bless them. They are incredibly critical to the whole situation. But if you're asking, how important are they to an ecosystem? And it's like, well, no one individual should really be all that important. Obviously, like you need to have a farm system where you can bring in people that are hyper intelligent and you can nurture them and you can keep them from burning out. And these structures become almost more important over time, right? Like you're going to run out of geniuses at some point. You're going to piss them off. Like there's going to be a decision that somebody makes that's a mistake that everybody, leaves, who knows what could be. And so yes, the core developers are a critical part of the equation. But I think the institution is actually a more important part of the equation. But let me rephrase that. The institution needs to protect the importance of that. It can't be left up to your rock stars to protect themselves. They're not going to know how to. Um, and I see wonderful evidence of this, frankly. I see tons of evidence of this. I think the Protocol Guild is fantastic evidence of this, trying to handle this from a financial standpoint. I think some of the recent changes at the EF have improved some of these things. So for instance, I don't know, like I always complain about we don't have any marketing. And people are like, what are you talking about marketing? Marketing's stupid. And it's like, I'm not talking about that kind of marketing. I'm not talking about advertisements. I'm talking about understanding your users and what they want. I'm talking about doing focus groups. I'm talking about collecting data. I'm talking about analyzing it, right? And we've never had a capacity for that. Again, not a mature institution yet, but we're starting to see that. So for instance, when I was at our recent Berlin Blockchain Week, we had an L2s day. And we had a wonderful conversation with the L2s, and we had actual focus groups. And we had these great conversations. So I think the importance of the core developers is a given. But what we're going to determine in the next couple of years is, can we build an institution, a long-lasting, durable institution that supports those core developers and brings more of them in, keeps them operating at a sustainable pace, right? And kind of nurtures and lets them be creative the way that we trust them to.
Trust, that's a big word, especially when you're trying to build a technology that removes trust from the equation as much as possible. Yet people don't really realize how much trust does go into the institution that is you guys, the core devs. And as much as I think it's important to educate people through this series about the skills and what company you started at and how to become a core developer, this political aspect of what it actually means to be a core developer in this ecosystem, I would argue is more important for people to know in advance and think critically about. But to that, can you elaborate a little bit more on the pain points in the protocol development process?
I don't have a ton of advice for the purely technical parts of the project. I don't know, like, I believe in client diversity. I think it is a very important part of why we have the uptime that we have. I don't know how to do that without having redundancy, right? Like having multiple teams working on things in multiple ways. And that has coordination overhead with it. And there's limits to human coordination, right? And we are trying to build technologies that speed that up. It's very hard to apply them to the building of those technologies. So I don't know. As far as process is concerned, I don't have a ton of advice, but I think going back to a lot of the soft skills things that I was talking about before, a lot of the maturity things, I think those are really big areas of improvement. And I've been critical fairly publicly, I think, of a lot of these things, and I think people hear it, and I think people are addressing it. I would love to see more diversity of thought, right? So like to me, the EF Foundation, for instance, maybe it's not a research foundation. Maybe it's a sponsorship for a lot more of these soft skills, or maybe there's a different foundation that does that. Doesn't matter. But maybe there's some sort of entity, doesn't have to be centralized, but can cater to people that have more organizational skills, have HR skills, have marketing skills, have dedicated communication skills. There's a lot of people out there that are interested in this that don't do math. And they can be force multipliers. Like they can actually take a team of really brilliant people and, you might have a bunch of 10x rock stars, but if you get them coordinating well and you get them positioned in the right way, they're going to be more efficient and more sustainable. I don't know that anybody's really thinking about sustainability from an organizational perspective. And that's just because the organization is not organized, right? It's intentionally decentralized.
And chaotic at times.
Yeah, and I think that's mostly a good thing. Um, I get a lot of my best ideas when I'm making connections.
Yeah.
I'm not the kind of person that like sits down and focuses on something and purely creates a good idea. My skill set is like finding synergies and finding overlap and like, oh, you should talk to that person, or oh, that's kind of like this, or are these related? And building those connections in the mind. And that's a skill that we can foster a little bit better, and we can build organizations that do that for the smart people that are in it.
I gotta say, I think it's also like welcome. What you're talking about is very welcome to listeners that don't have that math background. There are not like super developers, and kind of for people like me that are non-technical people that are participating in the Ethereum community and following Ethereum protocol development or interested in Ethereum protocol and development so much. Um, for listeners that are very interested in how Ethereum as a protocol, how changes get made to Ethereum as a protocol, who or what processes would you say is the most effective way for you to like change Ethereum?
Prototyping. That's huge. That is huge. And you can even lead your way into an EIP if you can come up with a prototype. If you want something, there's a couple of things that I would suggest. Keep it small, keep it high impact, and bring a prototype. Because if you can pick a client, you should pick Besu. Besu is awesome for prototyping. You can you could front run a lot of the competition and a lot of the thinking, right? And you have a test bed for taking feedback very quickly and folding it back in. So for instance, if somebody says, oh, I don't like the way that you've implemented T-store or T-load or whatever, awesome. You go back to your prototype and you make changes to it. You run benchmarks on it. You run existing tests that already exist You can spin up your own test networks to demonstrate it. And then writing the EIP becomes kind of a writing exercise and not so much a software design exercise, not so much of a protocol exercise. So I would say that the fastest route to getting what you want into Ethereum is being able to prototype it and show up with a throwaway example.
Would you say in terms of kind of consensus making around your prototype and getting eyes on it, is are there certain client teams or certain stakeholders in the Ethereum community that you would say are more important to get on board than others, or just gonna leave it general?
No, I'm not I'm not sure that it is a client team thing. I think it's definitely more of a stakeholder thing.
Okay.
If you have
Elaborate,
a
please.
problem, go find other people that have that problem and, take collective action and bring it forward. I know there's a lot of people that are working on ETH Simulate. I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's a new RPC call that they want to make standard. And anybody that has an application that they want to give their users an opportunity to kind of like simulate the transaction before they publish it to the mempool could stand to benefit from it, right? And you can kind of organize a grassroots movement around that just with other people that care about that particular problem. And use the power of that network. You may go a couple of degrees of separation once you build that network out and find you run into some client developers.
Okay, I see it. I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think for sometimes it can feel as though it's harder to contribute to an open source project than a closed source one because it's you can start so many places. It's like the grass, or I guess like the field is so open, it can be a bit jarring for people to know where to start. But I guess one of the pieces of advice is like to start somewhere and eventually you're going to get there.
So, you might not have this fictional idea that we just kind of kicked around that has a bunch of people that also have that problem. Maybe you're just want to contribute. And in that case, most of the teams have issues in their GitHub repositories that are labeled like good first issue or bug, or we use a term called snack. And snack is a term that could be pursued by an external contributor or an internal contributor who needs a break. Like if you've been working on the same, big piece of functionality for a long time, you're like, I just need a palate cleanser, and I'm going to work on this little tiny issue. So if you don't have a particular problem that you need to have solved, you just want to get involved because you believe in it, there's that other route, the less defined route. Find a need, fill a need.
I love that. I'm going to get that link from you so that I could include it into the show notes
Oh
for
yeah.
any of the
Yeah.
listeners. Okay, that was I think that was really helpful. We talked about, of course, how you got into Ethereum protocol development and also what it means to be an Ethereum client developer in the ecosystem. I want to take a bit of time now to just ask you a few rapid fire questions to end off our conversation. You can't spend very long thinking about these, okay? Just come immediately, what pops into your mind, just share it, and then we move on.
Let me take a drink of water so I'm ready for these.
Okay, that sounds good. Me too.
All
Let
right,
me know when
Christine,
you're
let's do
ready.
this.
Okay,
All
first
right.
rapid fire question,
Okay.
Justin. What do you like most about Ethereum protocol development?
Putting bankers out of business.
Love it. What do you dislike the most about Ethereum protocol development?
Gatekeeping.
What do you wish someone told you about jumping into Ethereum and Ethereum client development that you wish you knew before you got in?
I wish I knew that you should pay attention to the smart people. They're drinking from the fire hose too. They can't consume it the same way that you can. Don't get the imposter syndrome just because you don't know everything. Nobody knows everything.
Hmm. What is something that you wish more people knew about the way that Ethereum changes and evolves?
Huh. I guess that it's a tremendous number of people really care about this stuff and they think really deeply about it. And you will not run into intellectual laziness.
Last rapid fire question. What is the most necessary character trait to be an Ethereum core developer?
Hmm. Uh, Not humility, but like, what's a word for like being okay with failing? Self-confidence, maybe? But like not confidence, but like,
Like ability to bounce back?
yeah,
Or
don't beat
thick
yourself
skin?
up. Maybe thick
Okay.
skin, but that kind of implies that it's coming from the outside, and it's not. It's like you're gonna trip and fall on your face, and you can get yourself back up. You're gonna be fine. Dust yourself off.
Actually, this is one question I didn't ask, but I mean, Justin, how big is your team? How big is Besu?
Besu is 14 people, and we are spread across the Australian. There's only two Americans, mostly European and Australian. So I'm actually here on the east coast of the US, and I'm the only one.
Hmm, okay. Well, it's good to know that it's an international team, and I really appreciate that you took the time to tell me a little bit about your role and your team and how you got into what you're doing now. It was a real
Yeah.
pleasure to chat with you,
I'm
Justin.
really fun to work with. Come work with us. I think this has been great. This has been a lot of fun. We'll do it again sometime.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Devs. I'm Christine D. Kim, the host of the series. Meet the Devs is a mini-series of the ACD Toolkit, which you can learn more about on my Substack, christinedkim.substack.com. All of the information shared in today's episode and this series is strictly for informational purposes. Nothing communicated constitutes investment advice, an offer, recommendation, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. The interview that you just heard was recorded on July 16th, 2025. You can find more information about Justin, the Besu team, and Consensys in the show notes of today's episode. Special thanks to Shanae Kim for her help with the cover art for this series. And thank you everyone again for tuning in. I'll be back with a new episode soon. Talk to you guys then.